Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Lynn Nesbitt and I'm chairing our panel today. With me is in the room here is Carrie Linklater, and Stuart McPherson is joining us via Zoom. Our secretary to the board today is Carol Balshaw, and our assessor is Stephen Lobenstein. To the participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you'll be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So to begin, we'll just have the parties sworn in, please.
Mr. Assessor, for the record, please state your name.
Stephen Lobenstein.
Do you affirm the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, for the record, please state your name.
Jared Story.
Do you affirm the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Story and Mr. Lobenstein.
Good morning.
Our first file today is 1616 Cape Edward Street. And we have 3 points of appeal. I understand liability to taxation, amount of assessed value, and classification of property. Is that correct, Mr. Story?
No, we're assessing the value, only the value.
Only
not the
value?
class or liability. Yeah.
So you are not appealing liability or classification, only value?
Just the value, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
I'll forward him a withdrawal for those points.
Pardon me?
I'll forward a withdrawal for those points.
All right. Okay, then if that's the case, Mr. Lobenstein, you can start us off.
Sure. The roll number is 0701 0895 1616 King Edward Street. That's for the roll year 2022 with an assessed value of $5,145,000. The reference date though is April 1st, 2018. So looking at the property descriptions, we can see that there's 4 buildings on this property. The actual years built range from 1959 to 2019, and the wall heights range from 14 feet to 23 feet. We have a land area 147,341 square feet, a gross floor area of 45,196 square feet for a land plan of 3.27. So going down to my page 2, you can see there's a few sales on the property. There's one in 2007, and there was another in 2014 for $4.6 million. You can also see the request for information that they are compliant. That's at the top of page 2. So I'm just going to go down to the sales mailer that I included that was submitted by the owner of the building. So that would be on page, it starts on page 16. You can see that it is the consideration, the sworn value is $4.6 million. You can see that it was agreed upon sale on August 1st, 2014. The rest of it basically going down to the second page on page 17, you can say that it was purchased on capitalization rate of 7%. So there's a sales mailer confirming the sales of the property. I'll just go to my page 9 now, so you can get an idea of where the location is. 1616 King Edward Street is basically on the corner of Notre Dame and King Edward. Again, on my page 9, you can see an overhead view. You can see that there's 3 different buildings, including a restaurant that's right on the corner of Notre Dame and King Edward. That would be an A&W restaurant. Looking on my page 10, you can get another overhead view to get an idea of what the property looks like. You can see the 3 different buildings, the parking lot, and you can enter through Notre Dame and also enter and exit on King Edward as well. Okay, so that being said, I'll go up to my rental comparables on page 3. So what we have here are actual rents in the market. This is what our model is based off of. You can see we have lease start, lease term, leased area, average wall height, effective year built, and then you can see the net rents. So from 1151 Sherwin to 1174 Sanford, those are all industrial properties that are similar in age, square footage, wall height, and I'll apologize for that, and to the industrial part of the property. 333 Home Street down to 490 Inkster. These are all restaurants that are similar to obviously the A&W and what they rent for. So these rent comparables support our model rents, which we're going to be looking at now on page 4. So page 4 is our income workup. With our income workup here, you can see the first one is the industrial income. So this is the storage warehouse. There was 3 different premises on here with all different rents due to the different leased areas. So the average for all of them is $7.03 a square foot. So then looking down, you see we apply a vacancy of 4%. We have 2% expenses. We're applying a shortfall of $3.75 for a net operating income of $278,632. We're then applying a 6.5% capitalization rate to get the capitalized value of $4,287,000. So that's for the warehouse portion of the property. It has a separate income stream from the restaurant. On page 5, you can see the restaurant income stream. Here we're applying $26.55. This is supported by my rent comparables on page 3. We get a potential rent of $37,826. We're applying a 3% vacancy, model driven, of course, 2% expenses, and a 6.35% capitalization rate. which we apply to the net operating income of $54,479 for a capitalized value of $857,937. So then on my page 6, you can see how it's broken up and then added together for our total estimated market value of $5,145,000. Page 7 shows our capitalization rate tables. So you can see for the industrial, it ranges between 6.34 and 6.8. This property falls between the 20th and the 80th percentile for our capitalizations rates. Similarly, same with the restaurant as well. So moving forward, on my page 11, you can see the income expense mailer. So they've submitted their own, and they're showing a net operating income on page 13 of $116,206. But they also do include mortgage payments for the expenses. So that should be noted as well, where that shouldn't be included. On my page 18, you can see the permit that was put in place for the A&W for $1.3 million to build it. And then on my page 19, we have our fresh look. So you can see our capitalization rate evidence. The industrial rate evidence is on the bottom. You can see the 4 actual capitalization rates that are in the market. And we also have a non-recoverable expense sampling on my page 21, which shows that our 2% expenses is accurate. And there's just some external documents on my page 24 and 25 and 26. And 26 shows an industrial rates from 6.5 to 7.25. So our rates do fall with some outside references as well. So with all the information here, I feel the value of $5,145,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovenstein. Mr. Story, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you. Okay, so just very quickly go through your evidence here. Have you?
Sorry, my speaker is just messed up quickly. Can you just repeat your question?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just getting started. Can you?
Okay, thanks.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Have you visited this property for the purpose of this exercise?
I have not inspected. I've been to that A&W one time. I've never actually been inside the industrial part of the property.
Okay. But we can agree that there is call it a patchwork of different types of properties, different materials, different ceiling heights built it over the last 50 years. So it's a mix and match of different properties. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's got 2 separate industrial properties that were built at different times, and then of course they have the restaurant that was recently built as well.
Okay, and that 1950s office, that's all masonry construction. So is it safe to say that it's difficult or more difficult to demise masonry construction in offices when it comes to new tenants or for new tenancy? I'm not an expert on that. I don't know why it would be more difficult. Okay. Now, again, Otto's Taylor is a rigid steel construction, and the A&W is correct.
Mr. Story, yep. Your voice is breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's you're moving or just
nope.
but
okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what that is. Okay. In terms of the leasable area, the leasable areas that you've recorded here is 43,106 attributed to the what we'll call the industrial portion, the section that's not the A&W. Can you tell me how that was calculated?
The leasable area of 45,284.
Right, but when we subtract the A&W, the leasable area that we come to is 43,106, which is not consistent with the owner's submission.
So you're saying that the leasable area is 43,000. Well, that's something I'll have to look into. I'm not too sure about that.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you've mentioned the submission, the rent roll, and you've mentioned the income statement. Did you notice that the owner for this property has broken out the non-recoverable expenses?
Yes, he has broken out the non-recoverable expenses. Yep.
And that number for the months ending December 2017, the 12 months ending December 2017, is just north of $45,000, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And does that then in your mind support our calculation in our request for the non-recoverables, just on the warehouse section where we are applying 22,586? Does that seem reasonable to you?
Well, I think first of all, they're including leasing commissions, which in my rebuttal package that I put in, we do not include in our non-recoverables. They do have tenant improvements, but then they have professional fees and management fees. And those are interesting to put in there because usually those are recoverable expenses. So is this a one-time thing where they weren't able to recover it? So you would agree that management and professional fees are usually recoverable?
Typically in a triple net lease, yeah, typically they are.
So this is kind of odd. You would agree that they're not recovering these at the moment.
Well, no, I don't think it's odd. I think that it goes to show that the competent management of an income producing property does come with costs borne to the owner. Regardless, I just wanted to point that out. We can talk more about non-recoverables. I have a submission as well. But okay, now the land to plan is low at 3.27 to 1, and the sitting is somewhat atypical. Would you agree with that? For the siting?
So the land to plan you're saying is low, but I don't believe it's low for the location of the property. Usually in the St. James area, you're seeing more dense, lower land to plan buildings or properties, I guess.
Right, and that would be likely based on the vintage. These are older properties. For different standards in the 50s and 60s. That's safe to say for the industrial users of the time versus the industrial users of today.
I think what something else you have to look at here is that if land to plan was an issue for this building, then would they have built an A&W on it? Because you would agree by building the A&W, they've now taken away land.
Well, it does somewhat frustrate the land to plan issue. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure about this particular owner's motivations, but as a next purchaser, that may be an issue in terms of the type of tenancy that could be achieved in the industrial side. Okay, now you talked about the rents in place. Now, you're using $7.03, but the actual rents in place are higher, which we're using. So I won't, for the purpose of sake of brevity, I won't dwell too much on the rents here. But if the rents that are achieved here are higher than typical market, and I think we can agree on that based on what the model is producing versus the owners submitting, and we can see that the rents expire shortly after the reference date, do you think that would increase the risk profile of this property to a potential purchaser at the reference date? If you're seeing that the rents are above market and they're expiring close to the reference date, was that tantamount to more risk?
So above market, would that not benefit an owner coming in because they'd be making more money?
The rents being above market, the reference date certainly is a positive, but the fact that they're expiring close to the reference date is a negative. So if I'm an owner, in order for me to subtend these rents going forward, I would assume that I would have to, I'd have to spend some.
So they're
more
all
money
expiring
to achieve them.
in 2020, which is 2 years after the reference period.
Hold on, let me just put my leases here. Sorry, my PDF is freezing here. Give me one moment. Pull them up. Okay. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Yes, our rents are all expiring in 2020.
So a typical lease is about 5 years.
5 to 10 years potentially. Sure.
So 2 years is still a large portion of a 5-year lease.
Okay, so if we're talking about the strength of the covenant, which would again be tantamount to more risk, with 2 years remaining and rents above market, would that not equate to more risk from a next potential purchaser?
I guess you're asking me to make an assumption of a purchaser on what they consider risk.
Okay.
So.
Okay, fair enough. Now, in terms of the building details, are you aware of the percentage of this property that is the 1959 vintage versus with wall heights of only 14 feet versus the build in 2009, which is a rigid steel construction?
I did not calculate the percentages. No.
Okay. So there's no effective variant or variant age applied to the entirety of this property. Is that safe to say?
We do actually. We would have one effective age. Unfortunately, I didn't calculate.
Okay. So we calculated it as 1976. Does that seem reasonable?
That would be reasonable. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now the 6.5 cap rate, that's modeled, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and is that accounting for that variant age that we've established in 1976, the mix of materials, the different uses on the site, the quality, the age, the covenant of the tenants, the preponderance of short wall heights? Does the model cap rate take into any of those negative factors into account when developing a cap rate on this property?
It would, yeah. Just give me a second here. I just want to confirm what. Yes, well, fortunately I can't at the moment, but yeah, the model would take the age into account for calculating capitalization rate.
Okay, and you mentioned that the 20th and 80th percentile, I think you said 6.3 to 6.8, but I think you misspoke. It's 6.3 to 7.8, correct? For cap rates for industrial?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would mean that our property, and just for the sake of argument here, we're not disputing the value of the A&W, that's new construction. We're in agreement with that, so we're only focused on the industrial space. But that 6.5 would be, looking at your 6.34 being typical, this 6.5, that seems very low given some of the factors we've discussed here, does it not?
Not necessarily, no. Like we said before, it does have that new 2009 or newer 2009 build, steel construction. It's in a very good location. It's got a decent land to building ratio for the area. I wouldn't say that it's atypical for the area.
Okay. And just very quickly, in terms of your cap rates, you've submitted the 4 cap rates and you've mentioned them. Now, I just want to talk very briefly about 2 of them, and I have submitted rebuttal to the board for their perusal. 90 Park Lane, you're aware that property was purchased as vacant. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it did have tenants in it a few months before it was sold, so you can derive a cap rate from it.
So just to be fair, that the cap rate that you're using there was imputed or derived by you and was not used by the market as it was unencumbered at the time of sale as reported by Pirate, the vendor, correct?
I'm not too sure if they calculated a cap rate or not when they purchased the property.
Okay. And 1100 Waverly, fair to say that property, that's the Fort Garry Business Park. So that is not a typical industrial property. Would you say that's
I mean, that's fairly typical. I mean, it's a flex warehouse. It's got offices in the front, warehouse in the back. It's got overhead doors. I'm not too sure why that wouldn't be considered a typical property.
Okay, so we have preponderance of offices in that property. We have a restaurant. We have gyms. We've got a laser tag facility. So this is, and then also substantial renovations in 2012, correct?
Okay. Well, for a few things there. First of all, the property we're looking at has quite a bit of office in it, does it not? At 14-foot wall height.
Sure, but it's from the 1950s.
Sure. Second of all, the tenants don't define the property itself. The characteristics of the property do. So if these tenants feel that there are plenty of restaurants and industrial properties. You're seeing more and more gyms going into industrial properties because they like the overhead doors and the higher ceiling heights, particularly CrossFits. So, and office space has always been industrial as well. That's why we have the flex definition of warehouse.
Okay. All right. I think that those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Story. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Just a quick one. When I look at the income and expense reported by the owners or by the management company, whichever it was that did it, I noticed that there's parking income there, but you don't assess parking income on this particular property, or is it typical for you to do that on any properties?
There are times we do assess parking income. In this case, we are not assessing parking income.
Okay. And also, and this is probably a question that Mr. Story would know the answer to, but I noticed they also have a category of other revenue of 114,000 plus. Do you know what that was?
I do not know what that is, no.
Okay, I will ask Mr. Story when he presents his evidence then. So that's my own questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Lowenstein, you indicated that you did not inspect this property, correct?
I have not inspected the property.
Okay. Can you tell us when it was last inspected?
Actually, I cannot tell you that. I'm not too sure when it was last inspected. I would assume probably in 2010 or 2011 when the new construction was built there. That part would have been inspected.
Okay. And just one last question in regards to the age. You had 1959 to 2019, and I think you're saying that the A&W is the new construction, correct?
Correct.
So are all of the other buildings, were they all built in 1959?
No, there is the, when looking at my page 10, you can see sort of the 1588. That was built in 2009.
Okay, but then the others were built in 59.
Yes, the building in the middle was built in 1959.
Okay. Thank you, that's all my questions.
Thank you very much, and I have no additional questions. Mr. Story, you can proceed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so 1616 King Edward, as we've established here, this property was built over 3 phases in 1959. It's the predominantly the office area we've referenced here. 2009 is the rigid steel, primarily retail and warehouse auto parts, accessories, sales, and 2019 is the A&W. Now, for the purpose of this exercise, we are not disputing the assessor's calculation on the A&W, so we'll focus primarily on the storage warehouse component. The rentable area is 45,039 square feet. The assessed land area is 147,341, giving us a very low land to building ratio of 3.27 to 1 by current industrial standard. The 2022 assessment is $5,145,000. We are requesting that the assessment be adjusted to $4,908,000. So if you follow me with my brief to page 2, I was here at this property as recently as yesterday, and an agent from our firm did a full inspection of all of the properties about, I'll say, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and these are his photos. So I've been inside the rigid steel property, and I've been outside of the entire site. Okay, on page 4 of my brief, you can see the property from 2009. This is the rigid steel. This is being used as a retail area for car and truck accessories, and we can see their warehousing area in the back. Page 5 shows us the office space. It's masonry construction from 1959. You can see that it's considered this utility grade based on the quality of the interior finish. There's their warehouse, following those photos. Again, when we look at on page 6, now this is an overhead view that does not yet have the A&W on it, but it is at that corner of King Edward and Notre Dame. You can see on top of having an unfavorable or inferior land to building ratio, we also have the way that the property is sited is not advantageous for future use. It may be fine for what goes on there now, but in terms of future use, it may be seen as a value negative. So again, the original building was built in '59. It's brick and masonry construction. The total area of that initial premise is 27,000 square feet. There are 3 units in the building. The first faces King Edward, and at the reference date, it was occupied by Child and Family Services. The interior is part office and part open warehouse. The second unit is predominantly warehouse finish with a small finish section. And the third premise is located along the west side of the building, which faces the back of the site. That area has a small finished area at the north end of the building. The mechanical systems are part rooftop HVAC and part boiler heating. The wall height for the building is 14 feet for 20,134 square feet and 22 feet for 7,538 square feet. So you can see the 14-foot ceilings are predominant throughout this site. Now, the second building is at the south of the site. Again, that's rigid steel construction, built in 2009. And again, the interior is essentially retail in the front and warehouse space in the back. The primary difference here being that an HVAC system is in the front with suspended heaters in the back. The building is 15,000 square feet and it has a wall height of 23 feet. As we've established in 2019, an A&W restaurant was added to the north of the site with access from King Edward and Notre Dame. That improvement is wood frame and consists of 2,178 square foot with a 19-foot wall height, and the value of the A&W is not in dispute. We've accepted the assessor's calculation. So, as I've mentioned, we have looked at the rents in the property, and we've looked around to the market to determine whether or not they were appropriate. And as you can see, we've come to an average rent on the industrial area of $518 to $513. $518 is the average, $513 is the median. However, the rents in this property equate to $7.84. Now, I will suggest that action van and truck tenant is at $9.50. That is a newer building. Most of these comps are older, but again, for the sake of argument, we've used $336 and $96, which is higher than the assessor's rent. So we're using the rents in place as an indication of value. And again, that is slightly higher than what the assessor is using. However, with the application of these higher than market rents that all expire within a short period after the reference date, they will likely require landlord investment to attain. So in our view, it's imperative that an appropriate non-recoverable expense allowance as well as a capitalization rate be applied to this property. Vacancy is not in dispute here. We're using the same rate as the assessor at 4%. Again, you have our submission on non-recoverable expenses. We are continuing to apply an allowance of 7%. I can speak to that if you'd like. But you have our submission, and our position is that the competent management and ownership of an income-producing property comes with costs that are borne by the owner that are never recovered, and regardless of triple net or gross or semi, there are going to be non-recoverable or non-rechargeable over the course of the life of the asset, and so that is typical with market behavior that's consistent. So we continue to apply that in our valuation. Now, for the purposes of this report, we are disputing the assessor's capitalization rate of 6.5% on the industrial income stream. We believe that's too low. We have used a rate of 7.25%, 7% being the base we would seek for a property like this, but also recognizing the mix of uses, the mix of wall heights, the preponderance of a majority of the site being an office building that's difficult to redemise for the purposes of the owner going forward. So we've adjusted our base of 7% up to 7.25%. And again, we're accepting the valuation on the restaurant. So on page 16 of our brief, you can see that when we take the 7.2.
Do we lose him?
And blend it with the 6.3
Story,
blended
could you just
capitalization results in an income value of 4 million.
Mr. Story, I'm sorry,
Yes.
we lost you for a minute there.
Oh.
Can you just back up and recap your income summary
Oh.
again?
Absolutely. Sorry
Thank
about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of our income workup here, the major issue that we're looking at, the points of contention, are the 5% on the industrial side. We're adding that back in. The owner has expressed that there are non-recoverables in the ownership of this property specifically, but also we are of the belief and mindset that there are non-recoverable expenses borne by owners in the competent management of income producing properties. So we do apply that 7%. We continue to apply it in our valuation. Our cap rate, again, is 7.25 to recognize some of the specific factors in this property. We've got low wall height for a majority of the property. We've got a mix of different uses, and we have a land plan that limits future use for the current industrial market. So when we blend our 6.35 on the restaurant, the cap rate of 6.35, and our 7.25, the cap rate on the entirety of the property becomes 7.09%, leading us to an indicated market value at the reference date of 4,908,117, rounded to 4,908,000. So we do respectfully request that the board reduce the 2022 realty assessment to 4,908,000. The balance of my brief are my lease comps. We're not necessarily talking about rents here, so skip over that. And then we have the city's original workup. We've got the layout of the building from 1959. You can see that there's a great deal of demising that may need to be done. And again, it's difficult, supported by the owner in a masonry building to redemise space versus, say, a wood frame building. And then we have our building details from 2022 on page 26. You can see the different, the sort of patchwork construction of 1959 and 2009 and 2019. We have a variety of different materials and vintages on the site. And then the brief is rounded out with the income and expense submission that the assessor has included as well. So again, we do respectfully submit that the value be adjusted to 4,908,000 based on an adjustment to the storage warehouse income stream. And barring any questions, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, do you have any questions?
Just a few. So you were speaking of the risk to an owner in basically purchasing a property like this. So when you're looking at a cap rate, it's sort of like a measure of risk in a sense. What other like parameters would you consider when looking at a cap rate and the risk of a property besides the leases?
Okay, so if the cap rate is the numerical expression of risk, any factor that would give a next potential purchaser pause or trepidation should be captured in the cap rate. So if we look at durability of the income stream, the ability to maintain high level rents, the ability to stave off vacancy, potential repositioning of the asset or reversion at the end of the life cycle. So some of the factors that we look at here are quality of construction, covenants of the tenant. Wall heights are a huge factor in terms of the utility provided in the industrial sector. Land to building. So these are all factors, and there are others as well, but those I think would be the most typical. And I think we'll talk a fair bit today about wall heights, about land to building ratios.
What about the size of the building?
Well, the size of the building, sure. That if you, for example, if you have a very large single tenant building, that could be tantamount to more risk. Multi-tenant buildings generally tend to carry more risk than single tenant buildings. Typically, multi-tenant buildings have shorter leases, which affects the covenant. So that's in terms of the durability of the income stream. If we have less predictable income, that is tantamount to more risk. And of course, there's leakage. In finance, you would call that leakage, which is the potential for effectively non-recoverables. And that's higher tenant inducements over the life of the asset and higher potential leasing commissions over the life of the asset. So these are all factors that should be taken into consideration.
Okay, well then, in terms of that, just looking at your cap rate study on your page 13, you've listed a few different actual cap rates that you guys have calculated. There are two that stand out to me, number 3 and 4, Logan, and then there's also Keith Road and Sherwood Road. So Logan stands out to me due to its age, its location, its size, and it's coming in at a 6.36% cap rate. And the reason Keith and Sherwin stand out to me as well is because it's very close in proximity to the subject property. Similar to the subject property, it's a mismatch of buildings. There's a lot of buildings on this property built over a 10-year period. And also, it's a very large property at over 250,000 square feet, coming in at 6.94%, which you would think would be also a very risky proposition for a potential purchaser. So when we look at those in a similar area, similar ages in a sense, and one large building and one in a similar size, and they're coming in under 7%, would you then consider that maybe the city's model cap rate is more accurate?
No. So we're talking about, you're talking about Keith Road first. So
well, Keith, 3 and 4, yeah, Keith.
3 and 4. Okay. So I think like your cap rate study, what we're trying to do is benchmark different cap rates for different types of asset or types of industrial properties here. So if you look at the summary of our cap rate table, in terms of investment grade properties that would be considered an investment A grade property, we have a range of 6.25 to 7. B grade would be 7 to 7.75. Non-investment grade would be baseline 8% plus. That's consistent with the brokers as well. So I think that, yeah, there's adjustments for each of these properties to be certain. Very difficult to compare, 256,000 square foot property to our subject. But the purpose of the exercise of developing our cap rate study is to create those benchmarks where there are ranges for different quality properties. Now, I would suggest this is somewhere in, I guess, this would fall into a B grade property. I think that's very fair to say. I don't think the brokers would call this a B grade, as they tend to deal with more premium properties, larger, newer, typically bought and sold through investment trusts or pension funds. But I think that given our benchmarks, a 7.25 cap on this property, given the specific attributes, is quite reasonable.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Well, I think my question has become moot now. The rent is not in dispute, Mr. Story, for the property?
No, the assessor is using a lower potential rent, and so we are using the actuals, which are slightly higher. So no, we're not. It's not in dispute at this point.
Okay, so it's basically we're looking at non-recoverables. You want a 7% versus what the city allows at 2%.
That's correct.
And you're looking for a 7.25% cap rate on the industrial portion.
On the industrial portion with a 7.09 cap rate blended over the two income streams. That's correct.
Right, because you're accepting the valuation of the restaurant property.
We're accepting the valuation of the restaurant property, correct.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, and I have no questions. Okay, so we will move on to, Gotta find it here. 1680 Dublin Street. Mr. Lobenstein, when you're ready. Or does anybody need a little bit of a break before we proceed? We're okay? Okay, we'll carry on then. 1680 Dublin.
The roll number is 070106690000, 1680 Dublin Street. The roll year is 2022. The reference date is April 1st, 2018. And the assessed value is $3,851,000. Going down the property descriptions, you can see there's three buildings on the property for a total of 10 premises. The effective year and actual year built is 1988 with a wall height of 20 to 23 feet. The land to plan is 2.82. And so just going down to page 2, you can see this is already heard in the 2020 appeal year or board revision cycle. And it was confirmed by the panel based on the evidence presented by the Assessment and Taxation Department. So going forward, you can see on my page 3, there's actually property leases in place. And it should be noted that the Assessment and Taxation Department are using these leases in their calculation. Nonetheless, I did the exercise of doing rent comparables to show that it is at market. And so my rent comparables are in a similar area. The lease terms are strong at 5 years to 10 years. The leased areas are similar to the actual subject, and the wall heights are similar, and saying that the effective year built. So we would say that these are at market. So moving on to my page 5, you can see the work up there for the industrial properties. Just give me a second, and I'll calculate the rate here. $7.03, or rounded to 4 cents, I guess. $7.04 would be the blended. We're using a 4% vacancy, the 2% for expenses, and a 6.5% capitalization rate to get the estimated value of $3,851,000. So I'll just take you down to my page 9. You can see the location on Dublin. It's near Border Street in St. James, and just a little ways off from King Edward there. I can get a look at the property here on my page 9. You can see that it's side angle loading for two of the properties at the front there, and then there's also the rear property where it's front loading for trucks. And my page 10 shows another view of the property. So page 13 or page 14 shows the income expense statements. Shows the total revenue and the recovered revenue along with all the expenses. And they're also showing a net operating income of $231,567. As before, there is non-operating expenses it's showing. It is showing leasing commissions at $6,260 and owner repair and maintenance, which again I find interesting, at $34,000. Usually repair and maintenance is recovered. And then on page 16, you can see the leases of the actual tenants. So again, on my page 7 is our capitalization rate study. This falls in the 20th to the 80th percentile, 6.34 to 7.8. As we've already gone over, I've put our capitalization rate evidence on page 18 and our non-recoverable expense sampling on page 19. And there's just some external sourcing as well. On page 24 shows the capitalization rates as well. And our capitalization rate, 6.5 to 7.25, does fall within the industrial standards there. So that being said, I feel the value at 3.851 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. Story, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so first, and have you visited the site?
I have not.
Okay, so you don't have a general sense of the condition of the improvements or the siting or any of the site-specific issues on site at this property?
No, I do not.
Okay, and actual year built is 88, effective year is 1988. Is it fair to say that there's no permitted work that you're aware of that that would cause a variation in that age? It would adjust that upwards. So that's true to its vintage, late 80s. Is that fair?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. Now the land to plan here is 2.8 to 1. Now, you'd mentioned in building from 1960, 3.2 is typical of that era. Now, is this not extremely low, especially since the vintage is substantially newer than a 1960s property?
I think, as I mentioned before, and this is typical of what we're seeing in this area, and I think it's important to understand the St. James area, that it's an incredibly dense area. And to add to that, when you're looking at the M2 zoning, they're not really allowed a lot of storing outdoors, processing, manufacturing. That's more for the M3. So with your M3 heavy manufacturing, you're going to see larger land to building ratios. Here, with your M2 zoning, particularly in St. James, I guess as a property owner, it makes economical sense, and as probably a purchaser, to utilize as much of this property as possible to generate as much income as possible. Since they can't generate income by having vacant land, it makes sense to build.
So you're suggesting that land to building ratios are less important in an M2 zoning region?
I would say so. Yeah, they would be less important.
Okay, so can we agree then that the central underlying postulate of manufacturing is that product comes in, it's reconfigured into some other product, and then it's shipped out. So there's a lot of shipping and receiving and manufacturing. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, that's just one segment of the industrial sort of.
But the M2 zoning, we're talking about manufacturing. Right?
It says manufacturing, but also says general. So the general portion of that would be contractors, distributors. So like we said before, gyms, restaurants. Like there's so many different types of tenants that can go into M2 zoning that you can't just assume that they're processing something and then sending it out.
Right. And do you think that, say, for example, gyms or utility grade office space, do you think those are strong covenants that would give confidence to an owner, or do you think that's a low quality covenant?
I guess it's all different. I'm not too sure. I haven't studied how often gyms go under or how long they last. I would assume gyms have a lot of competition. I'm not too sure on that question, to be honest.
Shorter lease rates, probably lower. Shorter lease terms, lower lease rates, typically. So that's fair to say.
Again, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. And again, this was heard. This is we are looking at a trial de novo. This is new information. This was not our firm that presented this. This is all new information from the applicant's side. We can agree on that?
Sure, but I think it should be noted that nothing has changed within the building since this hearing was heard.
This is the owner is well within their rights to have this evidence heard. It's a new hearing for all intents and purposes. So just want to point that out as well. Okay, so when we look at the leases, we talked a little bit about covenants. You're aware here that there's a, and I was here yesterday. There's a property where a fellow sells, it's a local person who sells reptiles, right? There's a person who sells smoked buckskin. There's a local distillery. So these are not national tenants. These are safe to say. Is it safe to say in your mind that these are lower quality tenants affecting the covenant of the rents in this property? Is that fair?
Well, no. I mean, I think that these are the types of tenants that are drawn to a building like this. I think that's sort of the whole point.
Right.
Of looking at like industrial buildings. There's a wide swath of different types of industrial buildings, and these are the types of tenants that the tracks. And well, if we're looking at leases here, yeah, they're 5 years, 6 years, 5 years,
3 years.
This is 3 years. Yeah, there's more 5. So I mean, they're signing on for a typical lease term. So they're not month to month leases here.
Well, not month to month, but they're not 10-year leases from national operators with head office covenants supporting the leases. Okay, we can disagree on the covenant on these leases. Now, again, that capitalization rate at 6.5%, that's modeled.
It's modeled, yeah.
Okay, and you said you haven't visited this property, but is it fair to say when you look at the siting of this property and when you see the side loading, clearly loading is an issue, and that's why it was constructed with side loading. Is it fair to say that, for example, a 53-foot trailer would have a very difficult time servicing this property?
But this property wasn't built for a 53-foot trailer. That's why there's many different types of sizes of trucks out there.
Okay, so that would limit the types of tenants that could gain utility from this space. Is that safe to say?
Well, I mean,
a tenant who needs a 53-foot trailer to deliver goods to their warehouse would not be able to find any.
Well, they wouldn't consider renting from a building like this.
Okay. I think for the most part, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Just wondering if this is outstanding at the municipal board. Do you know Mr. Assessor or Mr. Applicant, either one? If the 2020 border revision order, was that appealed to the municipal board? To either of your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. I think we would likely not be hearing it today if it were. So, not to my knowledge. I'd have to double check, but I'm fairly certain that.
I don't think it is either.
Yeah, it would be redundant to hear it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any addition? Go ahead.
I was just going to confirm once again the land to building issue. I think it was covered in the last property as well. You're saying this particular area, this particular type of development, you don't think that the, what is it, 2.8? Is that what the land to building is?
Yeah, it's 2.82. And sorry, I just want to come back for a second. This actually is pending at the municipal board for 2020. I just looked it up.
Oh, all right. But as far as my land to building question, your statement applies to this as well as the last property. That
I think
type of area, the land to building of under 3 is not that atypical for this type of development in that area.
Yes, that is true.
Okay. Whereas it might be in another section of the city.
Yeah, if you're looking at the St. Boniface Industrial Park or even the Inkster Industrial Park, you're going to see much higher land to building ratio there. And that's kind of how they're constructed and configured. In the St. James area, due to the density of the area and being basically close to the center of the city, and the age, as we talked about, there's a lot of buildup in this area. So you're going to be seeing lower land to building ratio.
I thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions as well. So let's take a little bit of a break, 5-minute break, and then we'll resume. Thank you. My phone went off. I don't know how to put it on silent. It's a little switch. Oh, pardon me? Okay.
Sorry, go ahead now.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. I'd like to thank Mr. Lobenstein and Mr. Story for bearing with us while we had to deal with something. And Mr. Story, I guess it's your turn to carry on with 1680 Dublin.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so 16, as we've established here, the property was built in 1988. The city is assessing the asset at $3,851,000. We are suggesting an appropriate value for the 2022 assessment is $3,000,000. I visited the site. I did an exterior inspection yesterday, and again 2 or 3 weeks ago, an agent from our firm did a full inspection of the interior of the property to get a sense. Condition is one of the points that we'll be speaking to, as points of contention today are going to be the non-recoverables as well as the cap rate. The rents again slightly higher using the actuals, so we will limit our discussions to the cap rate. Yeah, non-recoverables for the purpose of this exercise. You can see the beginning of my brief has exterior shots to get a sense of this property. Again, rigid steel construction built in the late 1980s. If you follow me to page three of my brief, page 4 of the PDF, you can see how the siting is set up on this property, which limits its the ability for large trucks to come in, which limits the types of tenants, which we are arguing will have a substantial effect on the cap rate. So again, we have 3 industrial warehouse buildings. The wall height of 2 of the 3 buildings is 20 feet. The third building has 23-foot wall heights. That's the building at the southern edge of the property. The land area is 108,267, giving us a land to building ratio of 2.8 to 1. Again, this is an inferior land to building ratio compounded by the placements of the improvements at the site. As indicated in the aerial photographs, the loading is primarily based on angled docks. And then there's insufficient room for large tractor trailers, as we mentioned, specifically the 53-foot trailers in many cases. So again, this is a significant negative influence that should be recognized in the cap rate for this subject. The zoning is M2 manufacturing. My brief contains a number of photos. You can see the condition of the site. You can see the angled docks, a general sense of the condition. So it is a photo heavy brief, but we did a full inspection. So just to give you a sense of the condition again. As I mentioned, the assessor is using a potential net market rent that is slightly higher than ours. So we've determined that the rent in place is the best indicator of value. So we will use $7.11 per square foot based on the rents that are in this property, giving us a market rent per annum of $275.17. Again, close but slightly higher than the assessor. We will use that in our valuation. Vacancy is not in dispute. We've used 4%, as has the assessor. The shortfall rate is similarly not in dispute. We continue to apply an allowance of 7% of effective market income in our valuation of the subject to capture 2% for a structural reserve and 5% for non-recoverable expenses that are borne by the owner in the competent management of an income producing property. Now, the assessor is using a 6.5% cap rate. Again, we've stressed here that in some cases there's difficult access, in some cases there's virtually no access by larger trailers, which are now commonplace. So angle docks are in place, but the loading situation is very much inferior. It's very much below average. Again, the overall land to building ratio, less than 3 to 1, is below today's standards. So we are capturing that in our cap rate by adjusting our cap rate that we're using in our valuation to 7%. So that is the number that we will use in our workup. Page 17 of the brief, page 18 of the PDF shows you how we arrived at our figure. Again, 711, it's a blended rent, giving us $275.17 for a net market rent per annum on the asset, 4% vacancy, shortfall of $375, 5% for non-recoverables, 2% for the structural reserve, the capitalization rate of 7%, indicates a market value at the reference date of 3,424,770, rounded to 3,425,000. So we do respectfully ask the board adjust this assessment to 3,425,000 based on the information submitted here today. And again, that is largely based on a slight adjustment to the cap rate to reflect the site-specific deficiencies that are likely incurable in this property, and by factoring back the 5% non-recoverables back in. The balance of my brief is the rent roll, and then if you follow me to page 23 of the brief, 24 of the PDF, that's where the photos start. You can see this is the full exterior and interior inspection done by one of the agents in our office over the last 3 weeks or so. So I'll leave that for you to peruse. That'll give you a sense of the quality or the condition of the asset, the siding, the lowland building, the angled loading, some of the other issues that we've spoken about today. So again, we do respectfully submit the want to be adjusted to 3,425,000, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I think you're on mute.
Can't hear you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein?
There we go. Sorry about that. Just going back to your capitalization rate study on page 13. I'm looking at index number 3 again, Keith Road, Sherwin Road. Are you familiar at all with this property?
I'm less familiar with those properties than I am with the subject property, to be certain.
Would you agree that this property is similar in the sense to the property we're looking at, that it leases out similar square footage to tenants? So basically the premises are in similar square footage to what we're looking at today for these tenants.
Sorry, what page are you referencing here? 13, did you say?
Page 13, yeah, your index 3.
Okay, index 3, so Keith Road and Sherwin. So that's an older building. Yeah, and that's okay. So sorry, your question is.
So it's a multi-tenanted building,
right?
And the premise sizes are very similar to the subject property that we're looking at the moment.
It's much larger, though, correct?
The overall building's larger, but there's about 6 different buildings on this property. So it has a land to building ratio of 1.82, and all the premises in there are quite similar in size to the building we're looking at for our subject. Would you agree?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question is, would the tenants potentially in the building that we're looking at, our subject building, be able to or would rent from a similar type of building as this? So sorry, go ahead. So you're talking about that our building, subject building, is only attracting a certain type of subjects or a certain type of tenants. With this building, Keith Road and Sherwin Road attract a similar type of tenant, is basically what I'm asking.
So so I guess what you're asking is, would the property at Keith and Sherwin provide similar utility to tenants as our subject? Is that
correct?
With all things held equal? Sure, potentially.
Okay. And this has a cap rate of 6.94%. So closer to the city, 7%.
Okay, hold on. We're using. Sorry, 1 second here. I lost when I open multiple PDFs, my computer freezes me 1 second. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Okay, so for our property, given the condition, given the issues, we are suggesting that the cap rate ought to be 7%. Right?
Yeah, and this is 6.94. So this is lower. Okay. Okay, so and also the city's at 6.5. So it seems the city is also quite accurate as well.
Well, we're looking at, we're in a range. You're at 6.5, we're at 7. That's 6.94. Right. So 6.94 is closer to 7, right?
And then that's my same question. Would Logan Avenue have the same type of utility?
I'm not sure. Let me take a look here. So Logan has 20-foot wall heights, right? There's an effective age on that property, so there's been work done to provide a variant on it, right? Quality appears to be likely higher. So, I mean, they're different, and I think the loading capacity for that property, as evidenced by that photo, is there's a 53-foot trailer in the photo of that property. So I think there's probably greater utility on Logan. I think that's probably a superior property.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll proceed to item 5, 1499 King Edward Street. Mr. Lobenstein, whenever you want to proceed.
The roll number is 0701098600. It's 1499 King Edward Street. The roll year is 2022 with a reference date of April 1st, 2018, an assessed value of $2,086,000. So this assessed value was actually a board decision that came down. Fortunately, I couldn't find the order to put it in, but I can read to you what the order was based on. It's based on the net operating income with a 5% non-recoverable allowance added back in and a cap rate of 7%. So I'll read that one more time. Based on net operating income with a 5% non-recoverable allowance added back in and a cap rate of 7%. So that was the order that came down from the Board of Revision. Moving forward, we can see that there is one building with 2 premises on this property. The actual year and effective year built is 1962. The wall height is 18 feet. The zoning's M2. We have a leasable area of 27,200 square feet. There was a sale in 2007, but it's a multi-roll sale, so we're not putting any weight on it. So I'll just quickly take a look on my page 8 so you get an idea of what the property looks like. You can see the location. This property is interesting because it has access on my page 8. You can see to King Edward, and it also has access to Powell. So it sort of wraps around the building on the corner of Powell and King Edward. It is front loading access coming off King Edward and Powell. And then also there's some side loading off of Powell as well, as you can see on my page 9. And page 10 just gives you another view looking from King Edward. You can see the front loading as well. So there's some pictures of the property here you can see on my page 11. And you can see some exterior pictures of the front loading. This is coming off of from King Edward. And then on page 12, you can see the front loading and side loading. As you can see, they can fit large tractor trailers into this property, even with a low land to building ratio. Page 12 shows that it's also got a retail part of it. 13 shows the same. And then on 14, you can see the storage of all the products they have in there. And 15 just gives you another look at the retail outlet. So moving back up to my rent comparables. So they're all in fairly close proximity to the subject property. They're all in the St. James area. The lease starts are fairly recent in terms of the reference period. They range from 2015 to 2017. The lease terms range from 3 years up to 10 years. And the leased areas are very consistent with the premises. They range between 5,632 square feet up to 21,500 square feet. The wall heights as well are fairly consistent with the subject property, as they range between 15 feet and 22 feet. And the effective year built, of course, is very similar to subject property, being in a similar area. It's ranging from 1958 to 1980. And you can see our rents there. These are actual market rents, and they're used to support our model. You can see our model here. We have two different on our page 4. So our model has two different leasable areas, one at 21,286 square feet, another one at 5,914 square feet. We're applying $6.07 to one and $6.58 to the other for a potential rent of $168,120. Again, a 4% vacancy for the area, 2% expenses, and we're applying our 7% capitalization rate. So our capitalized number that we brought into the Board of Revision for the 2020 cycle was $2,201,000. But again, as we spoke about before, it was adjusted down to $2,086,000. So we've gone over our capitalization rate evidence on page 6. And you can see it falls between the 20th and the 80th percentile. So going further down, the income expense mailers are on page 16 and 17. And we have our capitalization rate evidence on page 20 and 21. So all considered, I feel the value that was reduced at the Board of Revision of $2,086,000 is fair and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. Story, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Okay. Again, have you visited this property for the
I
purpose?
personally have not, but it has been inspected, yes.
Okay. Now, the actual and effective age, as you mentioned, is 1962. So there's been no variant age. There's been no work to update that effective age or increase or extend the effective useful life of that property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This property doesn't have a basement, does it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and it appears built on an elevated slab, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now that affects the ceiling heights to clear it, doesn't it?
Necessarily. So we're measuring from the outside up, and it is on an elevated slab, but we have, I would like to think we took that into account, but yeah, we do have 18-foot wall height.
So typically when we have buildings that are built in the late 1950s and early 1960s that are built on these elevated slabs, that does affect the ceiling heights, just so we're clear. For the ceiling heights are 14 feet clear in this property. So would that provide limited use by today's standards?
Again, for the area, it's not really limited use as we've talked about before.
Okay, so you mentioned the area. There's high density in this area. Do you think that the new product coming on in the northwest quadrant would put pressure on this market? Do you think that it would cause competition for the new properties that are being built in Centreport coming online for new property, higher quality property? Do you think that has a positive or negative effect on these?
I don't think it's going to affect this area at all. As we've talked about before, that area is going to be drawing a totally different clientele base than what they have here. You're not going to find your DeWalt distributor coming out of working out of like Centreport. They want to be in the center. In my opinion, they want to be more in the center of the city where they can access their clients. Their clients can access them easier.
There are a variety of operators in Centreport. So in terms of just supply and demand, new product in that vicinity, no business tax. One would assume that if I were an owner, or if you were an owner, would that not give you some pause or cause for concern?
Not for how high the rents are going to be out there.
Okay, and land to building, once again, this one's 1.8 to 1. That's functionally obsolete for many users, is that correct?
Well, I mean, we've just went over this, and when we look at my pictures, how big are those on page 10 and page 12? How big are those trucks that are in there? Mm-hmm. Is that obsolete if they're utilizing it?
Well, there's issues with turning radiuses. There are certainly issues with a 1 to 8 land to building. I think that's fair to say. That's why we don't tend to build land to building. It's not up to today's standards. I think that's a fair comment, is it not?
I mean, yes, they're in different areas. They are building different sizes of properties, but again, for this area, this is pretty typical, and that's what we look at. That's why all of my rental comparables are based within this area.
Okay. Okay. Now, can we agree that this is an irregular parcel with an irregular configuration? You said it was interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. This is interesting. I haven't seen too many like this before, where you have two access points one off of a very major route and another one off a side street. So yeah, I would agree.
And it's not particularly advantageous to have that property sitting at it's 1975 King Edward, I believe, is the address. That impedes your parking and your ability to access the front of the building, like the King Edward entrance and the Powell entrance. It's almost like they're two different buildings based on that configuration, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be separated. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like they are two different buildings. So
okay, okay. And just to be clear, you don't think that's a negative, or you?
I mean, partially, it's interesting because they have two access points, which is pretty interesting because they do have that side loading for the King Edward side, so they can load and unload off Powell and have their customers come in off King Edward. So if it was a negative, they were able to fix that by putting the overhead door for the side entrance, or the side loading.
Okay. All right. So this is one where we are talking about rental comparables. Now I've gone through all of the rental comparables, and there are a number of them. Did you select these yourself? Are you familiar with all of them?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So are you aware then that the degree of finish, or the percentage of finished space in our subject property, is 7% approximately?
In terms of office space, finished space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Air conditioned finished space, the rest being warehouse.
Probably fairly typical for an industrial.
Okay. Now, in terms of your rental comps, we can go through each of them, but is it safe to say that your rental comps are generally superior to our subject in terms of condition, degree of finish, land to building, and clear heights?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I would say they're fairly typical for the area.
Okay, example, I'll just go through them quickly. 830 King Edward. Now I'm trying to determine, is that the tap room? Is that the tenancy?
No. They have, so this is an interesting property. So there is a brewery in here, and they occupy the front portion of the property, and they have 11-foot wall height. This is 19-foot wall height, but this property is really interesting because it only has side loading. You basically have to go down a back alley to load into a portion of this property. So no trucks can back in and out. They have to drive straight in and have a side door that comes up to unload and load. So that's a very interesting property.
So that property was a cabinet maker previously for many years, and it was renovated sometime between 14 and 12. If you check the permits, there's a tap room, which is effectively like a restaurant, and then there's also a blood laboratory. There's a Dynacare in there, correct?
But that's not this property here. This isn't the tap room. It's 19-foot wall height.
Okay, is it the medical clinic?
Just give me a second here.
I asked because I was surprised. Since 2010, there have been over 55 permits issued to upgrade the interior and the exterior. I looked at it because I saw that rent seemed extremely high.
It's not the Dynacare. Actually, this is the Torque Brewing. This is where they do their brewing.
That's what I thought. Okay. Okay. So we can say it's safe to say that it has been substantially upgraded, exterior, interior, and the use is a tap room, which is effectively like a restaurant / retail space, correct?
They don't. I think there's two portions of this. I'm not 100% sure. That's a good point. I'll have to look at that. But nonetheless, this is an industrial property with the 19-foot and the overhead doors. So, and as we spoke about before, it's not uncommon to have restaurants in industrial properties.
Right. Restaurants tend to generate a higher rent and require a different degree of finish than our property, correct? Okay. 982 Powell, that's right next door. Are you aware that that property has a degree of finish, according to the city records, of 100%? Higher quality space. Are you aware of that?
Nope. But let's see here. 982 Powell.
Yeah.
Is 2.52 is it the land to building ratio?
So higher land to building, higher degree.
Oh yeah, this one's interesting too because it's located. It has no frontage to the street. It has to drive through 2 buildings to get to the street. So again, access is an issue for this property as well.
Okay. 1821 Wellington, that's an engineering firm. That's an office space, correct?
It's on 1821 Wellington.
Yeah.
MCW Consultants. So
yeah,
it would be a consulting firm there.
Engineering firm. Okay. 29 Keith, that's on the roll as 15 Keith. Is that correct? When I key that in?
Yeah, 29 Keith. It's a similar property that we've talked about. It's in your it's your number. It's in your cap rate study actually.
15 Keith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that premise though is being used as office space, correct? A large not-for-profit.
15 Keith. Intra items, or that's 29 Keith, and
I have it as Diabetes Canada. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that's.
I mean, none of these are, again, as we saw in the property we're looking at, it's using it as retail space as well. So none of this is uncommon for industrial properties.
But we are trying to find properties that are of similar quality at the very least. Just one last one, 1653 St. James. I did notice that, or can you agree with me that has a superior vintage, superior land to building, superior wall heights, superior degree of finish, and superior zoning at M3.
1653 St. James, another interesting one. So it's got 2.34 for the land to building ratio. That's not too far off from the subject property. And this is a U-shaped property. So you can only load inside the U portion. There's no loading outside of it. So it makes it very difficult for access. So in terms of the finishes,
So
we have Lennox Industries in here.
Right.
So
and they've been there for a number of years, correct?
Right.
Since
So 22-foot wall height, I would assume that they're also utilizing the warehouse.
Okay. All right. Well, I've looked at all these, but I think it's safe to say, based on our review, that these are typically spaces that are renovated, higher degree of finish. I believe they all have higher land to building, and in some cases superior zoning. So I won't dwell on that, but let's see. So, okay, again, the income valuation. So I think you touched on this mathematically. The value that you come to is 2.2, but the assessment is 2.86, and that's based on the 5% that was awarded, but then you didn't include that in your valuation for this submission. Is that correct?
In my estimated value, I showed, at the very end, the board decided and why they decided it.
Okay. And the modeled cap rate on this property, again, is 7%. Is the model recognizing, again, the age, the condition, the land to building, the configuration, any of these, the obsolete land to building and ceiling heights? Are we factoring that in somehow, or how does the model capture that?
Location, size are the big factors when it comes to the model.
Okay. Okay. Now you've included brokers' reports as well. I don't think we've touched on this yet. I did have some trouble reading some of the narrative, but in terms of the brackets that the brokers are including, those reports contain rates that are typically based on investment grade properties, correct? So larger properties, stronger covenants, newer properties, more typical of what we'll call a modern industrial standard. Is that fair to say?
I would say yes, they do. But you have to also look at the fact that they're probably not even looking at these types of buildings in the market.
Right. Okay, that's exactly my point. So a property such as this wouldn't likely fall into the, it would have to be higher than what the brokers call a B, for example, correct?
Well, the point is that they don't even look at these buildings, right? So they don't really know what the cap rates are for them. Where with the city of Winnipeg, we have to look at all types of buildings and derive a cap rate from them.
And they don't typically look at them because they would be considered inferior by their metric, correct?
Again, it's a metric of risk. So a lot of times these smaller buildings compared to the larger ones out there do hold a lower risk.
Okay, so you think that a property that's effectively obsolete by current building standards, by today's standards, is carrying less risk?
I mean, I would say that these buildings are far from obsolete.
Okay. Okay, I think that those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Yes, you said that your valuation is based on a decision by the Board of Revision
Correct.
To allow a 5% non-recoverable. Has that been appealed by the assessment department to the municipal board, to your knowledge?
No, we have not appealed this one to the
Okay.
municipal board.
And secondly, you're not requesting an increase for this. You do believe it's still 2%, but you're not requesting an increase.
I do believe it's still 2%, but I'm not requesting an increase. No, I've accepted the board's decision for the valuation of it.
I see. Thank you. Your overall rent, I don't think you gave us a rate for your overall rate.
Oh, sure. Just give me a sec here. It'd be $6.18.
Okay, and the reason that there are different premises, there's different tenants, is that correct? Just under 6,000 and one just over 21,000 occupying the spaces?
I believe it's the same tenant, but there's just two premises in the building. As we look at page 17, you can see the rent roll. It's Prime Fasteners, So it's the same tenant, but there's two premises. So as I said, I didn't inspect it, but I believe there is.
One is retail and one is storage, perhaps?
Correct, yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's the reason there's different rates is because of the economy of scale primarily?
Primarily, yes.
Not necessarily the use of one being retail and one being storage.
It would be economy of scales for industrial properties.
All right, those are my only questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
No questions.
No questions. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Story.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so 1499 Edward Street. Once again, we have a property here, single story, built on an elevated slab in 1962 with no substantial permitted work that would affect the effective age. It's true, its vintage is a building from 1962. Rentable area is 27,200 square feet with an assessed land area of 1.1 acres. Again, this is an irregular parcel with an irregular configuration, leading us to a land to building ratio of only 1.8 to 1. So we've seen the photos, a sense of this property is one tenant occupying both premises, but at different points in this property's life, there have been other tenants occupying we call it the building that fronts onto Powell. But now the Prime Fasteners, the folks who sell construction goods, sell and warehouse construction goods, are occupying the entirety of the building, though the building is multi-tenant. It is both premises are occupied by the same firm. And just again, we are north of Powell, just south of Notre Dame Avenue in St. James Industrial Area. Again, older single-story light industrial warehouse, zoned M2. The wall heights are 18 feet high, but again, the clear heights are only 14 feet, and the land to building is 1.8 to 1. So as we've argued here today, these are incurable, functionally obsolescent factors that should be captured in the cap rate. Now, we've used the rent in place as the best indicator of market rent for the two preceding properties. We're doing that again for this property, though in this scenario, the rent being achieved is lower than what is being modeled. So I've included the calculation here on page 7 of my brief. You can see that for the partially retail, partially warehouse space, the rent being achieved is $5.75 per square foot. And for the warehouse, it's $4.80 per square foot, giving us a blended rate of $5.01 per square foot, resulting in a market rent per annum of $136,178. So we looked at that rent and we said, well, is this typical of market? What is going on in the area for older, typically under-improved industrial properties? And I have developed this table of lease comps. Now, I will ask that you disregard number 10. That is actually our subject. That this is a set of comps that I've used for these types of properties. So I do ask that you remove that. And when we factor that number out, our average changes from $5.18 per square foot to $5.20, with a median at $5.25. So given the fact that this is an institutional owner, it's a publicly traded real estate investment trust. So their goal is to provide value to their unit holders. So to suggest that this is a mom and pop operation, they are clearly able to achieve the highest possible rents for this subject property. So we do believe that given the check on the market with what they're actually commanding, we believe that the rents in place are the best indication of market rents for this property. So we will continue to apply the actuals at $136,178 based on a blended rent of $5.01. And again, that's partially retail, small portion is retail, and then a large portion of this property is warehouse. Okay, our vacancy, we are accepting the vacancy and collection loss. We are accepting the shortfall rate. We're applying the same rate in our calculation as the assessor. Again, we do continue to apply our 7% non-recoverables. Again, it's a standard allowance of 2% to the structural reserve, and 5% as a stabilized allowance for the non-recoverable expenses. We've talked about that. Happy to speak more, but we do believe that is appropriate. The assessor is applying a capitalization rate of 7%. Given the vintage of this property, given the irregular configuration, given the low land to building, and given the short wall heights, we conclude that a cap rate of 8% more accurately reflects the market view of the subject. So with all these points taken into consideration together, you can see on page 12 of my report, it's my income workup, we come to a value of $1,468,750, rounded to $1,469,000, and we do respectfully submit that the value at the reference date ought to be adjusted to $1,469,000. So the balance of my brief, I have my rental comps. You can see they are similar in quality, similar in location. Some of them have I think generally they all have higher land to building. Ceiling heights are similar, if not slightly superior, and that's reflected in the rents. So I do note that there's one at number 5 is slightly low, but it has a lack of fenestration. So there are different individual characteristics that account for the rents that are being achieved in these lease comps. But I think in the grand universe of these older industrial properties in this area, the rent that's being achieved by the institutional owner is the correct figure to use for the market on this space. So again, with all these points taken into consideration, we are requesting that the value be adjusted to $1,469,000. And I will take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, do you have any questions?
Just more of a clarification. So you said number 10 on your page, your index number 10 on your page 8. That's the subject property.
I'm sorry. On page 8, the rental comp, the last rental comp is the subject. Yes.
Okay. And then I'm sorry. And then looking up on your page 7, I'm just a little confused between the total leasable areas because you have 8,020 square feet, and then here there's only 5,914 and 21,000. So I'm just
hold on 1 second. Oh, okay. No, you're correct. So number 10 is actually right. No, you're right. That is my mistake. I thought that was the same. Yeah, no, you're correct. That's my error. So
it's not the subject.
Okay. No, it's not. Lease comp 10 is a different property.
Okay.
With that,
I was a little confused. So then, just bring me to your page 7. I'm just looking at so you're using the actual rents, but this is so the leased area 21,286. So these are all step ups, and the last time this one stepped up was in May of 2013.
It stepped up for a 5-year term in May of 13. That's correct.
So would you consider that rent to be a market then? Reference period of 2018.
Yeah, it's absolutely. There's yes, I do. I think it covers the reference period. It's slightly older, but I think that if a higher rent could have been achieved, I think this owner would have achieved it. I think this is yes, I do think this is indicative of market for this space.
So if this space was to be rented out in 2017, it would be rented out for $4.80 a square foot.
Although we'd be speculating, but I think that the owner of this space would know at the time what the appropriate rent, what the highest rent they could achieve for that space would be. Keep in mind, this is storage. This is not a tap room. This is not a finished office. This is storage space that's effectively serving that front building. So now I don't. We'd both be speculating on the motivation of the owner, but I would assume that would be the best or the most economically viable option that they would have had to rent that to the same owner to maintain that rent. I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Just a little clarification on your cap rate, 8%. Do you have a base cap rate that you started with, and then you made adjustments for some of the factors that you mentioned?
No. So based on our cap rate study, we have provided benchmarks. So we would consider this a non-investment grade property. Non-investment grade properties by our study begin at 8%, and then we would adjust upward for other site-specific factors. But we do believe that 8% is appropriate. There are a number of deficiencies with this property that are not curable. The site parcel is a major hindrance to value. It's a value negative. The wall heights, again, land to building. So I think 8% is actually fairly conservative given some of the factors going on here. But 8% would be the base for a non-investment grade property.
Right. So your benchmark of 8% takes a lot of those factors into consideration, is what you're saying.
I think that those factors would denote that property is non-investment grade, and so it puts it into that bracket of 8%. Yes.
Okay. I thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions? No questions. No questions. Okay, thank you very much. So we will move to item 6. 730 Century Street.
And Madam Chair, just as a point of housekeeping, we are just looking for to confirm this. So just so we're all aware. So I'm not sure if the assessor is aware. We're just looking for confirmation on this file.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, the applicant has requested a confirmation, but let's read the file information into the record.
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
Okay, the roll number is 07569056660, 730 Century Street, and the assessed value is $2,475,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobenstein. Well, I think we've heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned, and we will be making our decisions, and you'll hear from us shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.